The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with noise and tension. Representatives from dozens of alien civilizations sat in their special seats, each one built for their different body types. The air buzzed with the sound of translation. Devices working overtime as species from across the galaxy spoke in their native languages. Admiral Jake Morrison stood near the back of the human section, his dark blue uniform crisp and clean despite the long journey to reach this place. He watched as holographic displays showed images that made his stomach turn. The planet Aquatica Prime, home to the Zephyrians, was dying. What had once been a beautiful world of crystal cities and clean blue oceans was now covered in something that looked like rotting flesh. The Zephyrians were a peaceful people. They lived in underwater cities made of living crystal that glowed with soft light. Their bodies were translucent blue, and they moved through water like dancers. They'd never hurt anyone. They'd never started wars. They had always been willing to share their advanced knowledge of biology and healing with other species, but now they were trapped on their dying world, and nobody wanted to help them. "The vote is clear," announced High Counselor Vexthera, tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His voice echoed through the hall as the translation devices made sure everyone could understand him. "The contamination on Aquatica Prime is too dangerous. We cannot risk it spreading to other worlds." Jake felt anger building in his chest. He had been to Aquatica Prime before, during a diplomatic mission 3 years ago. He had seen the Zephyrian children playing in their crystal gardens, their bodies glowing with happiness. He had eaten at their tables and learned about their culture. They were good people. "But surely we can find a way to help them without putting ourselves at risk," said Ambassador Kadavara from the Altarian delegation. The Altarians had been friends with the Zephyrians for over 200 years. "The risk is too great," Vexthera replied coldly. "The plague that affects their world turns everything it touches into infected organic matter. It spreads through contact. If even one ship carries this contamination to another world, billions could die." Dr. Lisa Campbell, sitting next to Jake, leaned forward in her chair. She was Earth's best expert on alien biology, and she had been studying the reports from Aquatica Prime for weeks. "High Counselor, if I may speak," she said, raising her hand. "The human delegation may speak," Vexthera said with obvious annoyance. Humans were still the newest members of the Galactic Council, and many of the older species looked down on them. Lisa stood up, her tablet computer glowing with data. "I've been analyzing the plague samples that were sent to us. The contamination appears to target specific biological markers that are unique to Zephyrian physiology. There's a chance that other species might not be affected at all." "A chance is not good enough," interrupted Senator the Kalan from the Altarian delegation. "We cannot gamble with the lives of trillions based on a chance." Jake watched as one by one, the representatives voted. The Altarians, despite their long friendship with the Zephyrians, voted to abandon them. The Centaurians, who had traded with the Zephyrians for centuries, voted to abandon them. Even the Andromedans, who prided themselves on their wisdom and compassion, voted to abandon them. The holographic display in the center of the hall showed the current state of Aquatica Prime. The planet's surface was covered in a thick, pulsing, massive organic matter that looked like infected tissue. The Zephyrian cities, once bright and beautiful, were now dark, except for a few small areas where the dome shield still held. "We estimate that 3 million Zephyrians remain alive on the planet," reported the Council's science officer, a robot-like being called Unit 7. "They have enough supplies to last approximately 47 days. After that, they will either starve or be consumed by the plague." Jake felt sick. 3 million people were going to die, and everyone in this room was just going to let it happen. He looked at the faces around him and saw fear, but also something else, relief. They were relieved that it wasn't happening to them. "The final vote is unanimous," Vexthera announced. "No aid will be provided to Aquatica Prime. The system will be placed under permanent quarantine. Any ship attempting to enter, the system will be destroyed." As the session ended, representatives began filing out of the hall. Jake stayed in his seat, staring at the display showing the dying planet. Lisa sat next to him, her hands clenched into fists. "This is wrong," she whispered. "This is so wrong." I know, Jake replied, but what can we do? We're just one small species. We don't have the ships or the resources to help them alone. We have something else, Lisa said, looking at him with determination in her eyes. We have something that apparently no one else in this galaxy has. What's that? A conscience. Jake stood up and walked to the viewing window that showed space beyond the station. Earth was visible as a small blue dot in the distance. Such a tiny world compared to the vast civilizations that surrounded it. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. They were still learning, still trying to find their place among the stars. But maybe that was exactly what made them different. Admiral Lisa said, joining him at the window. I've been thinking about the plague, the way it spreads, the way it affects living tissue. I think I might know what it really is. What do you mean? I don't think this is a natural plague at all. I think someone made it. Someone designed it specifically to target the Zephyrians. Jake turned to look at her. That's a serious accusation. I know, but look at the evidence. The plague only affects Zephyrian biology. It spreads in a very specific pattern. And it started appearing at the same time that the Zephyrians were developing new biotechnology that could revolutionize medicine across the galaxy. You think someone wanted to stop them? I think someone wanted to eliminate them? Jake felt a chill run down his spine. If Lisa was right, then the Zephyrians weren't just victims of a random plague. They were victims of murder on a planetary scale. We need to get back to Earth, he said. We need to talk to the president. As they walked through the corridors of the station toward their ship, Jake thought about what they were facing. Earth was small and weak compared to the great civilizations of the galaxy. They had no powerful weapons, no vast fleets, no ancient wisdom. They were just humans, trying to do what they thought was right. But maybe that was enough. The journey back to Earth took 3 days. During that time, Jake and Lisa worked on their report. They gathered all the evidence they could find about the plague, about the Zephyrians, and about the political situation in the galaxy. By the time they reached Earth, they had a plan. It was a dangerous plan. It would put Earth at risk. Make enemies of some of the most powerful species in the galaxy. But it was also the right thing to do. As their ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Jake looked down at the blue and green world below. It was home to 8 billion humans. All of them. Going about their daily lives, unaware that their leaders were about to make a decision that would change everything. Do you really think we can do this? Lisa asked, sitting beside him as they prepared to land. I don't know, Jake admitted. Those people on Aquatica Prime are depending on someone to help them. If we don't, who will? One, Lisa said quietly. Absolutely no one. That was the truth that would drive everything that came next. In a galaxy full of advanced civilizations, only humanity was willing to stand up for the innocent and the abandoned. It was a heavy responsibility, but it was also what made them who they were. The ship touched down on the landing pad at the United Earth Defense Headquarters. Jake and Lisa gathered their files and prepared to meet with the president. They were about to ask their species to risk everything for people they barely knew. But that was what humans did. That was what made them different from all the other species in the galaxy. When everyone else walked away, humans stepped forward. The question was whether that would be enough to save 3 million lives on a dying world. The United Earth Assembly Building was buzzing with activity as President Maria Santos walked through the corridors toward the main chamber. News reporters from around the world lined the hallways, their cameras flashing as she passed. Everyone knew that today's meeting would be important, but few understood just how important it really was. Maria had been president for 3 years. She had never faced a decision this difficult. The reports from Admiral Morrison and Dr. Campbell sat on her desk, filled with details that made her stomach turn. 3 million innocent people were dying on a distant world, and the entire galaxy had turned its back on them. She entered the assembly chamber, where 500 representatives from every nation on Earth were waiting. The room fell silent as she took her place at the podium. Behind her, a large screen showed an image of Aquatica Prime as it had been before the plague, a beautiful blue world with crystal cities that sparkled like jewels. Ladies and gentlemen, Maria began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "We are here today to discuss a crisis that is happening far from our world, but one that will define who we are as a species." She pressed a button on the podium, and the image changed to show the planet as it was now covered in rotting organic matter that pulsed like a diseased heart. Several representatives gasped at the sight. "The Zephyrians are dying," Maria continued. "Their world is being consumed by a plague that turns everything it touches into infected tissue. They have less than 40 days before their last safe zones fail, and then they will all be dead." Senator Ben Rodriguez from the North American Federation stood up. He was a tall man with gray hair and worried eyes. "Madam President, with respect, this is a tragedy, but it's not our responsibility. Earth has its own problems to deal with." "Senator Rodriguez is right," added Representative Helen Chang from the Asian Alliance. "We barely have enough resources to handle our own planet's needs. We can't save every species in the galaxy." Maria had expected this response. She looked around the chamber at faces that showed fear, concern, and confusion. These people had been elected to protect Earth and its people, not to risk everything for aliens they had never met. "Dr. Campbell," Maria said, "please share your findings with the Assembly." Lisa stood up from her seat in the front row. She was nervous, but her voice was steady as she spoke. "Representatives, I've spent the last week analyzing every piece of data we have about this plague. I believe it's not natural. Someone created it specifically to kill the Zephyrians." The chamber erupted in whispers and murmurs. Representative Klaus Weber from the European Union raised his hand. "Dr. Campbell, that's a very serious accusation. Do you have proof?" "I have evidence," Lisa replied. "The plague only affects Zephyrian biology. It spreads in patterns that don't match any natural disease. And it appeared just as the Zephyrians were developing new medical technology that could help every species in the galaxy." "Even if that's true," said Senator Rodriguez, "what can we do about it? We don't have the military power to challenge the entire Galactic Council." "We don't need to challenge them," Admiral Morrison said, standing up from his seat. "We just need to help the Zephyrians." Jake walked to the front of the chamber, his uniform bearing the medals he had earned during his 20 years of service. "I've been to Aquatica Prime. I've met these people. They're peaceful, kind, and intelligent. They've never hurt anyone. They don't deserve to die because the galaxy is too scared to help them." "But Admiral," said Representative Sarah Kim from the African Federation, "what if the plague spreads to Earth? What if we bring back something that kills our own people?" "That's a risk," Jake admitted. "But Dr. Campbell's analysis suggests that the plague can't affect human biology.
Ow.
Our carbon-based cellular structure is completely different from the Zephyrian silicon-based cells. Suggests isn't good enough," Senator Rodriguez said firmly. "We can't gamble with 8 billion human lives based on a theory." Maria watched the debate continue for another hour. Some representatives supported helping the Zephyrians, while others opposed it. The arguments went back and forth, but she could see that most of the assembly was afraid. They were afraid of the unknown, afraid of the risks, afraid of standing alone against the entire galaxy. Finally, she raised her hand for silence. "I understand your concerns," she said. "This is the most difficult decision any of us will ever make, but I want to tell you a story." The chamber grew quiet as Maria began to speak. 50 years ago, when humanity first made contact with alien civilizations, we were terrified. We thought they might invade us, enslave us, or destroy us. Instead, they welcomed us into the galactic community. They shared their knowledge, their technology, and their culture with us. She paused, looking around the chamber. But we were never really accepted. We were always the newcomers, the primitives, the species that didn't belong. We were tolerated, but never truly welcomed. "Do you know why?" "Because we were different," said Representative Chang. "No," Maria replied, "because we were human. 'Cause we cared about things that other species had forgotten how to care about. Because we still believed that right and wrong mattered more than safety and convenience." She walked to the center of the chamber, her voice growing stronger. "Today we have a choice. We can be like every other species in the galaxy and turn our backs on the Zephyrians. We can choose safety over compassion, fear over courage. Or we can choose to be human. The chamber was completely silent now. Maria could see representatives thinking, weighing her words against their fears. "I'm not asking you to vote for war," she continued. "I'm asking you to vote for who we want to be. We want to be the species that abandons the innocent to die? Or do we want to be the species that stands up for what's right even when it's difficult?" Colonel Amy Brooks, the commander of the Terran Marine Corps, stood up in the gallery. "Madam President, my Marines are ready to deploy. We didn't join the Corps to stay safe. We joined to protect people," Captain Ryan Mitchell, who commanded the exploration vessel, U.S. Horizon, also stood. "My crew has already volunteered for the mission. We're ready to go." One by one, military officers throughout the chamber stood up. Then scientists, doctors, and engineers joined them. Soon half the chamber was standing, showing their support for the mission. Senator Rodriguez looked around the chamber with surprise. "You're all willing to risk everything for aliens we barely know?" "They're not aliens," said Dr. Campbell. "They're people. It's people who need help. That's all that matters." Maria felt pride swelling in her chest as she watched her fellow humans make their choice. This was what made humanity special. Not their technology or their military power, but their willingness to help others even when it cost them dearly.
Oh.
"Vote is called," she announced. "All in favor of providing aid to the Zephyrians." Hands rose throughout the chamber. Maria counted them quickly, her heart racing. When the count was finished, she smiled. "The motion passes with a majority of 73%. Earth will provide aid to the Zephyrians." The chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Some representatives looked worried, but most seemed relieved that the decision had been made. They were going to help. "Admiral Morrison," Maria called out over the noise. "How long do you need to prepare?" "1 week, Madam President. We can have a full fleet ready in 1 week, then make it happen." "Dr. Campbell, I want you to lead the medical team." "Colonel Brooks, prepare your Marines for deployment." "Captain Mitchell, ready your ship." As the assembly session ended, Maria stood at the podium watching the representatives file out. Some of them were excited, others were nervous, but all of them were part of something historic. Today, humanity had chosen to stand alone against the galaxy for the sake of people they had never met. Ambassador David Kelly from the diplomatic corps approached her. "Madam President, the Galactic Council won't be happy about this. They might impose sanctions, or worse." "Let them," Maria replied. "We're not doing this for their approval. We're doing it because it's right." That evening, Maria stood in her office looking out at the lights of the city below. Tomorrow, the news would spread across the galaxy that humanity had chosen to help the Zephyrians. The other species would be shocked, confused, and probably angry, but Maria didn't care. Today, humanity had shown what it meant to be human, had chosen compassion over fear, courage over safety, and love over indifference. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, knowing they had done the right thing. The Zephyrians were no longer alone. Humanity was coming to help them. And nothing in the galaxy would stop them. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Aquatica system with a flash of blue light. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Defiance, looking out at the scene before him. What he saw made his blood run cold. The entire system was surrounded by alien warships. Hundreds of them floated in perfect formation, their weapons pointed toward the dying planet at the center. Ships from the Altarian Empire, the Centaurian Republic, the Andromedon, Collective, and dozens of other civilizations formed a massive blockade around Aquatica Prime. "My God," whispered Captain Ryan Mitchell from the UES Horizon. His voice came through the communication system, filled with shock. "There must be over 300 ships out there." "We're not taking any chances," replied Colonel Amy Brooks from the marine transport ship U.S. Guardian. "They really don't want anyone getting close to that planet." Jake studied the tactical display on his screen. The human fleet consisted of 12 ships, not very many compared to the massive alien blockade. They had medical ships, supply vessels, and a few military escorts. It was a small force, but it was all Earth could spare. "Admiral," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Tony Garcia. "We're receiving a transmission from the blockade fleet." "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. The image that appeared showed Commander the Kalan of the Altarian fleet. He was a tall, insect-like being with 4 arms and compound eyes that gleamed with anger. Behind him, Jake could see the bridge of a massive warship bristling with weapons. "Human vessels," Dickalon said, his voice cold and threatening. "You are ordered to turn back immediately. This system is under total quarantine by order of the Galactic Council." Jake stepped forward, his uniform crisp and his expression calm. "Commander the Clone, this is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. We are here on a humanitarian mission to provide aid to the Zephyrians." Humanitarian mission. This voice was filled with disbelief. "You risked the lives of every species in the galaxy for the sake of one dying race? Turn back now, or we will be forced to stop you." "Negative," Jake replied firmly. "We will not abandon people who need our help." The communication ended, and Jake could see the alien fleet beginning to move. Their ships were massive, some of them the size of small cities. The human fleet looked like tiny insects compared to them. "Admiral," said Dr. Lisa Campbell from the medical ship U.S. Mercy. "I'm detecting life signs on the planet. Zephyrians are still alive, but barely. We need to get down there soon." Jake looked at the tactical display again. Alien ships were moving to intercept them, but they hadn't opened fire yet. They were probably hoping the humans would see the impossible odds and retreat. "All ships," Jake announced over the fleet communication system, "form defensive formation around the planet. We're going to establish a protective perimeter." "Sir," said his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Williams, "we're outnumbered 30-1. We can't possibly fight all of them." "We're not here to fight," Jake replied. "We're here to protect." The human ships moved forward, their engines glowing bright blue as they accelerated toward Aquatica Prime. The alien blockade responded immediately, moving to intercept them. Jake could see weapon systems charging on dozens of enemy ships. "This is your final warning," came another transmission from the alien fleet. This time it was High Counselor Vexitera himself, speaking from the bridge of the massive dreadnought. "Eternal judgment. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." "We hear you," Jake replied, "but we're not leaving." The first shots came from the Centaurian ships. Bright energy beams lanced out, striking the shields of the UES Defiance. The ship shook under the impact, but held together. Jake gripped the railing as more shots followed. "Shields holding at 80%, reported Lieutenant Williams. "We can't take much more of this." "All ships, maintain formation," Jake ordered. "Do not return fire. We are here to protect, not to attack." The human fleet pressed forward through the hail of enemy fire. Their shields flared and sparked as they absorbed the punishment, but they kept moving. Jake could see the planet growing. Larger on the screen, its surface covered in the horrible organic plague that was killing the Zephyrians. "Admiral," came Captain Mitchell's voice over the communication system. "The UES Horizon is taking heavy damage. We're losing power to the engines." "Stay with us, Ryan," Jake replied. "We're almost there." The human ships reached orbit around Aquatica Prime and spread out in a defensive formation. They formed a protective shell around the planet, their shields overlapping to create a barrier between the dying world and the alien blockade. "We're in position," Jake announced. "Dr. Campbell, begin your scans. Let's see what we're dealing with down there." The medical ship began scanning the planet's surface. The results appeared on Jake's screen, and they were worse than he had feared. The plague had consumed most of the planet's surface, turning forests and cities into pulsing masses of infected tissue. Only a few small areas remained safe, protected by energy domes that were clearly failing. "I'm detecting approximately 2.8 million Zephyrian life signs," Dr. Campbell reported. "They're concentrated in 12 safe zones, but the power systems protecting those zones are failing. They have maybe 2 weeks before the barriers collapse." "Then we need to get down there now," Jake said. "Prepare the landing shuttles, Admiral." Lieutenant Garcia interrupted. "I'm receiving a transmission from the planet." "Put it through," Jake ordered. The image that appeared on the screen was heartbreaking. A Zephyrian leader named Tekthera appeared, her translucent blue form flickering with patterns of color that the translation system converted into words. She was clearly weak, her body dim compared to the bright glow that healthy normally displayed to humans, she said, her voice filled with wonder and disbelief. "You came. After all the great civilizations of the galaxy abandoned us, you came. We're here to help," Jake replied. "We're going to get you out of this." But why? Tekthera asked. Why would you risk your lives for us? We are nothing to you. Jake felt emotion welling up in his chest. This was why they were here. This was what made humanity different from all the other species in the galaxy. Because that's what friends do, he said simply. And you're not nothing. You're people who need help. Tekthera's form brightened slightly, patterns of gratitude flowing across her translucent skin. We will remember this always. Whatever happens, we will remember that humanity stood with us when no one else would. The transmission ended, and Jake turned back to the tactical display. The alien blockade was regrouping, preparing for another attack. More ships were arriving every hour, swelling their numbers even further. Admiral, said Colonel Brooks from the Marine Transport, my teams are ready to deploy to the surface. We can begin evacuation procedures immediately. Do it, Jake ordered. Get as many people out as you can. The first shuttles began their descent through the atmosphere protected by the human fleet's defensive formation. Jake watched them go, knowing that each one carried the hopes of the Zephyrian people. Sir, Lieutenant Williams called out. The alien fleet is charging weapons again. They're preparing for a major assault. Jake looked out at the enemy ships. Surrounding them, there were so many of them, and more were arriving all the time. The human fleet was like a small island in an ocean of hostile forces. All ships, he announced, maintain position. No matter what happens, we protect this planet and its people. The second attack came harder than the first. Dozens of alien ships opened fire simultaneously, their weapons creating a light show that lit up the darkness of space. The human shields flared and sparked under the massive assault. Shields down to 40%, reported Lieutenant Williams. Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12. Emergency repair teams to the damaged sections, Jake ordered. Keep those shields up. Captain Mitchell's voice crackled over the communication system. Admiral, the UES Horizon is in bad shape. We're losing life support on 3 decks. Can you maintain position? Jake asked. We'll hold the line, sir. We're not going anywhere. That was the spirit that defined humanity, Jake thought. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing impossible odds, but they refused to give up. They had come here to help the Zephyrians, and they would not abandon them. The battle continued for hours. The human fleet absorbed punishment that would have destroyed most other forces, but they held their position. Their shields flickered and failed. Their hulls were punctured by enemy fire, but they did not retreat. Admiral Dr. Campbell called from the medical ship. We've established contact with the Zephyrian scientists on the surface. They're willing to work with us to find a cure for the plague. Good, Jake replied. That's our best hope for ending this. As the night wore on, Jake stood on his damaged bridge, looking out at the fleet of human ships that had become a shield around the dying planet. They were battered and broken, but they were still there, still protecting, still refusing to give up. Somewhere below, on the surface of Aquatica Prime, Zephyrian families huddled in their failing safe zones, watching the battle in the sky above them. They knew that 12 small human ships were all that stood between them and certain death, and for the first time in months, they had hope. 2 weeks had passed since the human fleet arrived at Aquatica Prime, and the situation was getting desperate. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, looking at damage reports that made his heart heavy. Half of his ships were barely holding together, their hulls cracked, and their systems failing. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Williams, the UES Guardian has lost main power. They're running on emergency systems only. Jake nodded grimly. The alien blockade had grown even larger. Over 400 ships now surrounded the planet, and they took turns attacking the human defensive line. The humans never got a chance to rest or repair their ships properly. What about supplies? Jake asked. Food and medical supplies are running low, replied Captain Ryan Mitchell, over the communication system. His voice sounded tired. The UES Horizon had taken so much damage that half the ship was sealed off due to hull breaches. We can last maybe another week. Down on the surface of Aquatica Prime, the situation was even worse. Marine Lieutenant Kate Sullivan crouched behind a piece of twisted metal that had once been part of a Zephyrian building. Around her, the city looked like something from a nightmare. The plague had turned entire blocks into living tissue that pulsed with its own heartbeat. Streets had become rivers of infected matter that moved like thick blood. Buildings that had once been made of beautiful crystal were now covered in growths that looked like tumors. Sergeant Park, Kate called to her second-in-command. "What's the status on the evacuation?" Sergeant Danny Park crawled over to her position, his armor covered in a slimy substance that the plague had left behind. "We've got 57 Zephyrians in the transport area, ma'am, but there are still hundreds more trapped in the lower levels." Kate looked at her scanner. The energy dome that protected this safe zone was flickering. The power generator was failing, and when it died, the plague would consume everything inside within hours. "We need to get them out now," she said. "How many more trips can we make?" "Maybe 2, if we're lucky," Danny replied. "The shuttles are taking a beating every time they try to land. That organic stuff is trying to grab them." Kate had seen it herself. The plague wasn't just killing the planet, it was hunting the infected. Tissue reached out toward anything that moved, trying to drag it down and consume it. It was like the entire planet had become one massive predator. "Lieutenant Sullivan," came Dr. Lisa Campbell's voice over the radio. "I need to talk to you." Kate made her way through the makeshift camp where the rescued Zephyrians waited. They huddled together in small groups, their translucent bodies dim with fear and exhaustion. Many of them were injured, their forms flickering with patterns of pain. She found Dr. Campbell in the medical area, working alongside a Zephyrian scientist named Veltara. They were studying samples of the plague under a portable microscope. "What have you found?" Kate asked. Lisa looked up, her face pale with exhaustion. "Kate, this plague isn't natural. Veltara and I have been analyzing its structure, and we've found something disturbing." The Zephyrian scientist's form pulsed with colors that the translator converted to words. "The plague contains genetic markers that do not exist in nature. Someone created this weapon specifically to kill my people." Kate felt anger building in her chest. "Who would do something like this?" "We're still investigating," Lisa replied. "But whoever did it has access to very advanced biotechnology. This is beyond anything most species in the galaxy can create." Above them, in space, the battle continued. The human fleet had arranged themselves in a tight formation around the planet, their damaged ships overlapping their shields to create the strongest possible defense. But it wasn't enough. "Admiral," came a new voice over the communication system. "This is High Counselor Vexthera of the Galactic Union. I am coming aboard your flagship to speak with you personally." Jake was surprised. Vexthera was the most powerful being in the galaxy, leader of the council that ruled over hundreds of species. Why would he want to meet face to face? "Permission granted," Jake replied. "But I'm not changing my mind about helping the Zephyrians." An hour later, Vexthera's personal transport docked with the UES Defiance. Jake met him in the main conference room, along with Dr. Campbell, who had been brought up from the surface. The High Counselor was even more imposing in person, his tall gray form radiating authority and power. "Admiral Morrison," Vexthera said, his forearms gesturing as he spoke. "You have put the entire galaxy at risk with your foolish actions. End this now, and I will allow your fleet to leave unharmed." "We're not leaving," Jake replied calmly. "These people need our help." "These people are already dead," Vexthera said coldly. "The plague will consume them all within days. You cannot save them." "We can try," Dr. Campbell interjected. "We've discovered something about this plague that you should know." She activated her tablet, showing the genetic analysis she and Veltara had completed. This plague was created artificially. Someone designed it specifically to target Zephyrian biology. Vexthera's expression didn't change, but Jake noticed a slight stiffening in his posture. "That's impossible. Our investigations showed it was a natural mutation." "Your investigations were wrong," Lisa said firmly. "Or someone lied to you." "Even if that were true," Vexthera replied, "it changes nothing. The plague exists, and it must be contained. I will not risk the lives of trillions for the sake of one dying species." "What if we could cure it?" Jake asked. "What if we could stop the plague and save the Zephyrians?" "Impossible," Vexthera said dismissively. "The greatest scientists in the galaxy have studied this plague. There is no cure. The greatest scientists in the galaxy also didn't figure out that it was artificial, Lisa pointed out. Maybe they missed something else too. Vexthera stood up, his towering form filling the small room. Admiral Morrison, you have 24 hours to evacuate your people and leave this system. After that, we will use whatever force is necessary to maintain the quarantine. And if we refuse, Jake asked, then your ships will be destroyed and your species will learn the price of defying the Galactic Council. After Vexthera left, stood looking out at the stars through the conference room window. Earth was somewhere out there, so far away that its light would take years to reach this place. He wondered if he would ever see home again. Admiral, came a voice from behind him. It was Captain Mitchell, who had come aboard for an emergency meeting. The crew is asking questions. They want to know if we're really going to fight the entire galaxy. Jake turned to face his officers. Dr. Campbell was there, along with Colonel Brooks and several other senior staff. They all looked tired and worried, but none of them looked ready to give up. I won't lie to you, Jake said. The odds are impossible. We're 12 damaged ships against the entire galactic fleet. We're running out of supplies. Our weapons are nearly depleted, and our shields are failing. But, Colonel Brooks prompted, but those people down there are counting on us. They have no one else. If we leave, they die. It's that simple. Dr. Campbell stepped forward. Jake, I think I've found something. Veltara and I have been working on the plague samples, and we've discovered a possible weakness. If we can synthesize the right compound, we might be able to neutralize it. How long would that take? Jake asked. Days, maybe weeks. But we need to stay here to do the work. Jake nodded. Then we stay. Send a message to Earth. Tell them what we've learned about the plague being artificial. Tell them we're going to keep fighting. That night, as Jake tried to get some sleep in his damaged quarters, he thought about the choice they had made. They could have returned to Earth as heroes, having rescued a few thousand Zephyrians. Instead, they had chosen to stay and fight. For all of them, down on the surface, Lieutenant Sullivan and her Marines worked through the night, rescuing more Zephyrians from the failing safe zones. The plague grew stronger every hour, but the humans refused to give up. In her makeshift laboratory, Dr. Campbell and Veltara continued their research, searching for a way to stop the artificial disease that was consuming an entire world. And, in space above them, 12 battered human ships held their position against impossible odds, serving as a shield between innocent people and the galaxy that had abandoned them. They were tired, outnumbered, and running out of time. But they were still there, still fighting, still refusing to abandon those who needed their help. That was what made them human. And tomorrow they would prove once again that being human was enough. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m, ship time. Dr. Lisa Campbell had been working in her laboratory for 18 hours straight when she finally found what she was looking for. Her hands shook as she stared at the data on her screen, hardly believing what she was seeing. Admiral Morrison to the medical bay immediately. She called over the ship's communication system. Her voice was filled with excitement and anger at the same time. Jake arrived within minutes, still wearing his sleep clothes, but fully awake. He found Lisa standing over her computer, her face pale but her eyes bright with discovery. Jake, you need to see this, she said, pointing at the screen. I've been tracing the genetic markers in the plague, trying to find out where it came from. And? Jake asked, though something in her voice told him he wasn't going to like the answer. The plague was created by the hegemony, Lisa said. A shadow organization within the Galactic Council. They've been secretly eliminating species they consider threats to their power. Jake felt his blood run cold. The hegemony? I've never heard of them. That's because they hide behind other organizations. But look at this. Lisa pulled up a series of genetic codes on her screen. These markers are like fingerprints. They show exactly where the plague was created and by whom. She pressed another button and a list of names appeared. Jake recognized several of them as high-ranking officials in the Galactic Council, including some who had voted to abandon the Zephyrians. They targeted the Zephyrians because their biotechnology was becoming too advanced, Lisa continued. The Zephyrians were developing medical treatments that could help every species in the galaxy. that threatened the hegemony's control over galactic medicine and trade. My God, Jake whispered. They're committing genocide. It gets worse. Lisa said, this isn't the first time. I found evidence of at least 6 other species that were eliminated the same way over the past century. Each time it looked like a natural disaster or plague. Jake grabbed the communication device from his belt. All ships. This is Admiral Morrison. Prepare to broadcast on all galactic frequencies. We're about to expose the biggest conspiracy in galactic history. Within an hour, the human fleet was broadcasting Lisa's findings to every corner of the galaxy. The evidence was overwhelming. Genetic markers, communication intercepts, financial records, and testimony from Zephyrian, scientists who had survived the initial plague outbreak. The reaction was immediate and explosive. On dozens of worlds, people watched the broadcasts with growing horror as they realized what had been done in their name. The Zephyrians hadn't been victims of bad luck. They had been murdered. Admiral came a transmission from the blockade fleet. This is Captain Zerathol of the Altarian vessel Stardancer. Is this information accurate? Jake appeared on screen. His uniform crisp, despite everything his ship had been through. Captain, Dr. Campbell has verified every piece of evidence multiple times. The hegemony created this plague specifically to kill the Zephyrians. There was a long pause before Zerathol responded. When she did, her voice was filled with shame. By the ancient codes of honor, we have been deceived. We have allowed innocents to die based on lies. It's not too late to make this right, Jake said. Help us save the Zephyrians. One by one, ships began breaking away from the blockade. First the Altarians, then the Centaurians, then others. Within hours, the massive fleet that had surrounded Aquatica Prime was dissolving as commanders refused to be part of genocide. But High Counselor Vexthera wasn't giving up easily. From his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, he broadcast his own message to the galaxy. These accusations are lies spread by primitive humans who don't understand the complexities of galactic politics, he declared. The quarantine must be maintained. However, his words fell on deaf ears. More evidence was coming in every hour as other species began investigating their own records. The pattern was clear. The hegemony had been manipulating galactic politics for decades, eliminating anyone who threatened their power. Down on the surface of Aquatica Prime, the situation was changing rapidly. With ships no longer attacking the human fleet, Dr. Campbell was able to transport her laboratory equipment to the planet's surface. Working alongside Zephyrian scientists, she began developing a cure for the artificial plague. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan watched from the entrance to the safe zone as Dr. Campbell and Veltara worked together. The two scientists had become close. Friends over the past few weeks, sharing knowledge and ideas across the species barrier, Lieutenant said. Sergeant Danny Park, look at this. Kate turned to see what he was pointing at. In the distance, the wall of infected tissue that had been advancing toward their position had stopped moving. For the first time since they had arrived, the plague wasn't spreading. Dr. Campbell, Kate called over the radio. Something's happening out here. Lisa's voice came back immediately. We've done it, Kate. The cure works. We've been injecting it into the atmosphere around the safe zones, and it's neutralizing the plague. Over the next several days, the cure spread across the planet's surface. The infected tissue began to break down and dissolve, revealing the original landscape underneath. Crystal cities that had been consumed by the plague were slowly revealed. Their structures damaged, but intact. The Zephyrians emerged from their safe zones for the first time in months, their bodies glowing brightly with joy and relief. They worked alongside the human marines and scientists, helping to spread the cure and rebuild their world. Admiral came a transmission from Earth. President Maria Santos appeared on screen, her face beaming with pride. The entire galaxy is talking about what you've done. The Galactic Council has been dissolved, and a new government is being formed based on principles of protection and cooperation rather than control. What about the hegemony? Jake asked. Being hunted down by law enforcement from a dozen species. Most of their leaders are already in custody, including Vexthera. It turns out he was one of the founding members. Jake felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. They had done more than just save the Zephyrians. They had exposed a conspiracy that had been poisoning galactic politics for generations. 3 months later, Jake stood in the crystal gardens of New Aquatica, the rebuilt capital city of the Zephyrian homeworld. Plague was completely gone, eliminated by the cure that Lisa and Veltara had developed together. The planet was more beautiful than ever, cities gleaming in the light of the twin suns. Tekthera approached him, her form glowing with patterns of deep gratitude. "Admiral Morrison, how can we ever thank you? You've saved not just our lives, but our entire species." "You don't need to thank us," Jake replied. "This is what neighbors do for each other." "But you were not our neighbors when you came to help us," Tekthara pointed out. "You were strangers who chose to risk everything for people you had never met." Jake thought about that for a moment. Maybe that's what made us neighbors. To help. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Representatives from hundreds of species came to Aquatica Prime to witness the signing of the new Galactic Accords, a set of laws that guaranteed protection for all species and made genocide a crime against the entire galaxy. Dr. Campbell was awarded the highest honors that dozens of species could bestow. Recognizing her scientific work and her role in exposing the hegemony conspiracy, Colonel Brooks and her Marines received medals for their courage in the face of impossible odds. But the real victory wasn't in the awards or recognition, it was in the knowledge that no species would ever again face extinction alone. The galaxy had learned the lesson that humanity had taught them, that civilization was measured not by technology or military power, but by the willingness to protect those who could not protect themselves. As Jake prepared to return to Earth, Tekthera gave him a gift, a small crystal that glowed with soft blue light. "This will always remind you that you have friends among the stars," she said. "And whenever any species faces darkness, they will remember that humans were the ones who chose to be the light." The journey home took several weeks, but Jake didn't mind. His fleet was no longer alone. They were escorted by ships from a dozen different species, all of them now allies and friends. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had been the catalyst for that change. When Earth came into view, Jake felt tears in his eyes. They had left as representatives of a small, insignificant species. They were returning as the people who had saved galactic civilization itself. But most importantly, they were returning as the species that had never forgotten what it meant to be human, to help others, even when it was difficult, even when it was dangerous, and even when they were standing alone against the entire galaxy. That was the true victory. That was what would be remembered long after the wars were forgotten. And the empires had fallen, humanity had chosen compassion over fear, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to be civilized.